Hello, and welcome to the Gold Doctor Podcast. This is episode 6, and today's title is Laziness is Relative. Once again, laziness is relative. And I have a quote today, and it's one of mine from an article I wrote, or really just a note I would share with a lot of my students when I taught classroom management. And it goes simply like this. Calling kids lazy is the lazy way out. Again, calling kids lazy is the lazy way out. If you are a educator, psychologist, parent, adult who works with kids, aunt, uncle, whoever, if you're spending time talking to a kid and telling them they're lazy, you're simply just putting a label on them. You're not giving them an opportunity to do what you'd like for them to do. So today, I really want to focus in on getting beyond this idea and these notions of laziness. So let's take a review for a moment. Again, we need measurable, observable, and doable goals, as we talked about in our first few episodes. And then also, as we've talked about in our last 3 episodes, we need to be able to look at the indicators of motivation, which are active choice, mental effort, and persistence. Today, we're going to really narrow down in on this idea of laziness. And so I wrote an essay a few years ago, and I'm going to read that essay, but I'm going to kind of revisit it for today's times. Many parents, whether it's because of the COVID-19 shutdown or because parents I see then when I started, 25 years ago in comparison, they're more likely to be engaged in their children's schoolwork. And they have particular takes and views upon how that goes. So as a new teacher, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about kind of my view and how I've evolved to understand laziness. As a new teacher, I felt I had worked hard to earn my degree. The school where I was working at, they paid me all of a few dollars per hour to teach. I was enthusiastic about my course. I was teaching PE and I was also a substitute teacher. Yet my students, when they didn't demonstrate the same level of enthusiasm, I would become upset internally. Now, I wouldn't necessarily tell it to them, but they could see my frustration. I would be so focused on getting them to do what I wanted, I missed learning why they were not working and getting done what they needed to get done, or weren't even understanding of something I was so enthusiastic about, so I can help them better understand it. Back then, I didn't know the 3 indicators of motivation. And more specifically, I was really clueless about the different types of laziness. I thought if you were lazy, period. No, there might be issues with procrastination. There might be issues with tardiness and or disorganization. The more I worked with young people, the more they taught me about those differences. So I'm going to read this essay here that I wrote. And it's titled, Calling Your Kid Lazy is the Lazy Way Out. As a psychologist, I've always struggled with the term lazy. Now, let me straighten that out. As a child and now a man, especially a black man growing up in mostly white schools and churches, I've really struggled with this label being put on people, especially me. Our work ethic is relative to circumstance. Each generation often feels that the successive generations did not have it as hard as me. When we were kids, we had to walk to school with the sun beating down on our heads and the snow freezing our feet, while the wind chapped our lips to a raisin-like texture. Kids don't know how good they have it. That said, compared to my father, I'm a lazy cuss. After growing up on a foster home with his brothers and sisters, my father volunteered. Yes, that's right. My dad volunteered at the height of the Vietnam War. So life was so uncertain for many of my dad's friends. Joining the Army and getting a GI Bill seemed more stable to my dad. After the Army, while in college, my dad worked 40 to 50 hours a week as a janitor and went on to earn a bachelor's and master's degree. He never took a dime from his parents for school because there was none to take. So fast forward after I was born, 16 years later, and my dad lands his first job as a school administrator after teaching for so long. I am home from boarding school, high school, where I lived. And on a Sunday morning at 6 a.m., he starts a cement mixer just by my room and says, "Brandon, I'm waiting for you to get to work on this cement." I roll back over and go to bed, tired and bewildered by this hardworking old man of mine. 22 years later, I still feel guilty for not getting up at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning. After earning a college degree, receiving accolades from my colleagues, and 10 plus solid years of working as a school psychologist at 50 plus hours a week, I still feel lazy. However, logic tells me I am not, but the feeling is still there. If I compared my dad to me, sure, my dad is nowhere near lazy. But let's say I compared my dad to my cousins in West Africa, some of whom have to walk 3 miles a day to get water every morning. And if I compared them to our faucet drinking, showering, toothbrushing, wasting water behinds, my dad and I look extremely lazy. However, these are false comparisons between my dad and I, as well as my dad and our cousins in Africa. The immigrant experience in America also brings generational challenges that can pose this false comparison. The stories can also start. "I sailed on that boat from a place where we had nothing, and now you want to shop at the mall and date these American lazy kids." The true comparison is more personal, yet still influenced by the culture. However, let's look at some even broader cultural examples that give us an American context. America is a young country. We have this concept of who is lazy based upon some warped perception that we really have not detailed yet. Our people work more and take vacation less, yet we have this notion and even some health evidence, such as obesity, that we are lazy. From an African-centered or Native American-centered lens, one could say that the founders of the U.S. were lazy. They had to shoot at people and make them not go. Man, that's hard to even grasp. I'm reading this here, but they had to force people, right, at gunpoint and constrict poor folks to fight for their freedom in a Revolutionary War. And some of those reminders are thanks to historian Howard Zinn, who has passed on since. So if you have read history books and seen pictures of black folk, even up until the 1960s, one can get the impression that black folk acquiesced totally to slavery as well as segregation. And all these songs they sang showed they were having a good time eating watermelon and chicken. However, even common sense lets you know that was far from the truth. It was a struggle just to stay alive. Some folks sang to keep from going crazy, while many sang to send codes about escaping slavery. Yeah. Perspective. So a recent Stanford study showed that our efforts to increase productivity through the trend of multitasking has not helped us as a society. Multitasking has only served to confuse us and make us less productive. I suggest that things like hyperconsumerism and obesity are why many Americans act out their efforts to balance their lives from the hard work we do. We play hard, enjoy our toys, and eat what feels good. My basic argument that by and large we have some lazy moments, but Americans look silly when we call each other, and especially our children, lazy. So let's get into the science of lazy, or at least approach this from a more logical point of view. Laziness can be broken down in issues with motivation, concern about changing identity, and my favorite, passive-aggressive behavior. And I say it's my favorite because it's the one I do most frequently. However, as I've learned, everyone is motivated to do something. Even the 30-year-old who stays at home with his mom while playing video games is motivated to get a higher score on that game. Our labeling others lazy is a simple, or better yet, lazy way of looking at a complex problem, and that is getting people to do what we'd like them to do. Here's an invitation. Rather than talking about people generally, especially the people you love as being lazy, begin to think about and talk with them about how specifically that laziness is manifested. You can get into 3 major issues, and I'm trying to keep it simple: procrastination, tardiness, or disorganization. So let's start with procrastination. So for procrastination, the main issues have to do with either a skill deficit, or a person is embarrassed to ask for help, or a personal health issue that they may not even know about. Another huge issue with academic procrastinators, especially adults, are that change may result if they finish this big project. So, for example, this is what happened to me. A dissertation may lead to people calling them doctor or a new job, which brings about a new identity. And sometimes procrastinators may just stop writing or doing what they need to altogether because they're worried about this identity change. Sometimes as well, procrastinators may justify multitasking to their own detriment. So help them by narrowing down their focus to one thing at a time rather than multitasking. Also, take an honest look at the skills they need to finish the project, as well as the pros and cons of a major change in their life, especially if they are unaware of exactly what that change may bring to their life if they get the project done. Tardiness is often about worry or stress. The worry may be about what others think, so they try to avoid the situation they should be on time for. Also, it may be a passive-aggressive thing that they may be unconsciously aware of, but sometimes consciously, to regain some sense of control over their lives. A solution may be to focus on relieving stress by regaining some sense of control over their life. Again, that goes back to one of our indicators of motivation, active choice. Also, many of you may have seen the shows Hoarders or Clean House. People in these circumstances have emotional blockers to letting go of things or their time to organize, to really take care of even things that are important to them. There is a fear they may lose something and never regain that part of their lives. The challenge here is to find ways to reinforce for them that they themselves will not lose their personal value with you or others as they let go of things that are cluttering their lives in their backpack, in their room, or that space and time they feel they must have. Finally, talk about these issues with your lazy loved one, but don't use the word lazy. Focus in on one of the aforementioned three as the main area, such as procrastination, tardiness, or disorganization. Your quote-unquote lazy loved one may be seriously depressed, medically ill, or have some of these worries I spoke about above, so get specific with them and get them help. The broader social issues I spoke of, generational and social views of laziness, should be a part of your awareness, but are often irrelevant, especially for children. So during the discussion about a change in habits, avoid the old when I was a kid stories. These stories only make the older adult feel superior and serve to make the child feel like they will never measure up because they can't have sun in their head and snow at their feet and go uphill both ways going home. It just won't happen. So let them know you love them for them and that you want them to grow compared to their own standard you help them set, not to your own life. So in other words, stop living vicariously through your kids. All right. I feel like I'm procrastinating about something and I need to get back to something in my own life. But again, that's my way of being passive aggressive towards things. All right. So that was my essay I wanted to share with y'all. I hope it made sense, but I hope it makes sense within the context of us developing clearly articulated goals, right? So next time we will talk about history, culture, and overcoming challenge in relation to our personal leadership goals, right? Our personal and leadership goals. Thanks for listening. I'm the Goal Doctor, Brandon Gamble. I hope you enjoy each moment in the journey as you continue to reach your goals.